Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
Now, the most definitive account of the films made by the most infamous and influential studios of the 1980s, Cannon Films. The Cannon Film Guide Volumes 1 and 2 gives you the true stories from the people who made them, and truth is stranger than fiction. From American ninjas to masters of the universe, from Charles Bronson to Chuck Norris, from Bloodsport to Texas Chainsaw 2, take it over the top on your Superman 4 quest for peace. These books have got it all, folks. A passionate journey through the highs and lows of pure 80s goodness. The Cannon Film Guide illustrates all the behind-the-scenes mayhem of one of the most beloved cult movie factories of all time. We at The Offering highly recommend these books. They are essential reading for any and all film buffs. The Cannon Film Guide, Volume 1 and 2, available now at Amazon, iTunes, or wherever finer books are sold. 80s and 90s horror fans, it is time to rejoice. You've seen his work, you're a fan of his art, and now you can wear artist Mark Schoenbach's Sadist Art Designs. If you're a fan of cult classic horror, you know his work. You've seen it everywhere, from the Halloween franchise to Pool Party Massacre. Whether it's at Slashback Video or Mac and Me, you will recognize his distinct style instantly. Now check out his latest stock, including R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike inspired merchandise. Visit sadistartdesigns.com and put some respect on your swag. Welcome to The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Each week we take a deep dive into the history of film and filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you find your favorite podcast to stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, this film was initially conceived as a sequel to 1987's Masters of the Universe. The producers wanted to shelve this film. That was until the star became a worldwide box office sensation. A stunt performer got his eye poked out with a real knife. I mean, come on, don't you want to listen now? A guy lost his friggin' eyeball to make this movie. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this.
Creepy classics, modern fights. Jerry guides us through the nights. Horror's history in the lights. Exploring endless chills and heights. George Romero, lost footage and hidden gems. Director's visions, dark diadems behind the scenes. We're taken there. In sinful whispered secrets we share. Sam Raimi. The Offering with Jerry Horror. Stories old and new. Jason Kruger, Bruce Campbell. Genre twists that shake your core. Every episode we craving more. Mostly horror, always genre.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, this is The Offering, and I am your host, Jerry Horror. Welcome back. It's the week before Halloween, and I'm loving spooky season. You know how much Uncle Jerry loves that spooky season. We got all kinds of scary stuff put up on the walls, on your mother's bedroom. We got all kinds of shit. It's crazy. No, I'm sorry. I was out of control there. I was a little bit out of line talking about your mom's bedroom because there ain't no talking when we're in there. All right. Seriously, though, we're like one sound effect away from this just becoming a wacky morning radio show. We're giving away $100 if you call right now. Give me $100. Hey, have you bought a t-shirt yet on TeePublic? I'm just saying, go take a look. In all seriousness, though, we have another 5-star review. As I've always said to you folks, if you write us a good review, I will read it on air. I won't read the bad ones because, woo, those bad ones are pretty bad. And they say that I'm an imbecile and that I probably can't even read this review on air. But they're wrong because I learned to read how? From comic books. Yeah. So here we are. 5-star review, Pitch Perfect by Gazpacho. Wow, that is very Italian. Gazpacho. The Offering is a perfect podcast, factual, without being pretentious. I mean, come on, there's no pretension here. I just made a joke about your mom's bedroom. Anyway, a charismatic and hysterical host deep dives into films that mostly get looked over. Jerry is the best, and I have listened to most shows multiple times. Wow, you really getting it in, huh? Trying to get all that Jerry up in you. Thank you for your Xanadu love, but please don't speak ill of the latter Jaws sequels. They are gold, LOL. What does that mean, LOL? Oh, I see what you did there. In all seriousness, though, Gazpacho, thank you. It's very kind of you to say that. Jaws 2 is okay. They should have just called it another Jaws. Jaws 3D is in 3D. So it gets a bonus point for being in 3D. Also gets a bonus point from taking place in SeaWorld. Having the mom from My So-Called Life is in there as the female lead. We've got Dennis Quaid in there. Dennis Quaid. I've got a funny... Can I tell my Dennis Quaid story? This is pretty bad. I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway because we're all friends. This isn't going to get to him. And please don't tell Jack Quaid because I'm a pathetic star fucker and I would love to meet Jack and tell him just how great his work on The Boys is. No, he would probably get a kick out of this. And plus, he knows Dennis Quaid just played Reagan. Oh, I heard that Reagan movie's hysterical. It did well. It was like #2 at the box office. People are seeing it. In a movie where Scott Stapp of Creed plays Frank Sinatra. I kind of want to see it now. I'm going to be honest with you. And here's the thing. I'm a big Reagan guy. Not that I was a fan. I think he did a lot of damage to the United States because of the back-end deals that he signed with corporate America. Look it up, folks. He basically made corporations people and made them omnipotent. So all those times that you tried to sue because there was broken glass in your baby formula, good luck. Thanks, Ronald. In all seriousness, though, I will watch that Reagan movie. Probably no way I can watch it sober, but I definitely will watch it. Jaws 4 is Jaws 4. It's got Michael Caine. If you say Michael Caine fast, Mike Cocaine. Okay, whatever. Thank you for your Xanadu love. Hey, look, sick plug, man. Dude, the Xanadu episode. Seriously, go back and listen to that. Some of you don't even know what that is. But it's roller disco, cocaine, and the Electric Light Orchestra. How can you beat that? That's a great episode. I love that episode. In fact, let's shut this off, Producer Pete, and let's go listen to that episode. All right, everybody, take a breath. There we go. And boom, here's my Dennis Quaid story. Talking about Dennis Quaid. Okay, so I have a friend that works at a prominent musical venue in New York. I won't say what he does because that'll give away the thing. I don't want the dude to lose his job, even though, I'm not going to say it. I don't want to get in trouble. So Dennis Quaid has a band. I don't know if a lot of you were aware of this. I wasn't. I didn't even know. Because I was going down there to go pick up dab pens from him because he's got a really sick Connect. Sick plug for his sick Connect. And I would go and pick up like these crazy dab pens from him. So I ran over there to the venue and he's like, oh, we're setting up. And I'm like, who's playing? He's like, you know Dennis Quaid? And I was like, motherfucker. I was like, the Dennis Quaid from Enemy Mine and Jaws 3D? Yes, of course. And the forthcoming Reagan. No, Reagan's on digital right now. You can order it. Like you know what? You would think this show is sponsored by the producers of Reagan have pumped a lot of money into The Offering, so I got to bring it up. We'll be talking about this movie today, and I got to bring it up again. In all seriousness, though, he's got a band. They're playing here tonight. I hear yelling. Obviously, they've got some kind of bus, and there's the green room, and I hear all this screaming and yelling. And wouldn't you know it, all the screaming and yelling is coming from one Dennis Quaid. And Dennis Quaid is listen, I don't know if this is his everyday thing. I don't know what his story is, but he's a madman, an absolute fucking madman. And they're trying to get a sound check done to start the night to figure out for his band. And they do covers, they do some originals, but I wasn't aware of this either. Dennis Quaid has groupies. I guess everybody does. I don't. I'm still working on that part. I think we have to make the show successful. Then get groupies. I think the groupies is like 2, and then 3 is profitable. Not sure how that works. Not sure the order that goes in, but we will get there, folks. Hey, look, if you're listening to this and you're a beautiful woman, please send me nudes. Also, Dennis Quaid is a fucking madman. He's running around, and there's groupies, but they're not like hot young groupies. They're not what you think they are. They're a little bit older. And when I say a little bit older, I say about your grandmother's age. And they're hanging out, and they got their tits hanging out, and they're like, like they're just talking. They're just hoping they can get a piece of that tasty Quaid meat, not the new, young, fresh sirloin that is Jack Quaid. I mean, hey, who wouldn't want to bark up that tree if you catch my drift? But they want a piece of the old Dennis Quaid. He's running around and he's making a ruckus. Man, I'm like, I am mentally ill, but I'm like, this is a whole new level of mental illness. So they come out, they do the sound check. He ends up kicking over the drum set. I swear to God, all of this happened. It's absolutely ridiculous. He's like a bull in a china shop, and they can't get this sound check done. So he comes down, and after sounding like shit, he asks one of the sound engineers, he says, hey, how did that sound? That's my Dennis Quaid sounds like Christian Bale in The Dark Knight. He's just crazy. I'm telling you, this guy was unhinged, but we're going to get to why, or possibly why. I think there's something wrong with the man. I don't know what's happening. So he's like, how'd that sound? How did it sound good? And I'm just standing there like, yeah. And he's like, I'll tell you what. He's like, we're breaking up some lines, baby. We want to do some lines with old Quaid. And I was like, no, even though it was tempting, I am not going to do. Dennis Quaid is like, I think he's in his 60s or his 70s. I'm not fact. I don't give a shit. He's like my dad's age. And look, I love my dad, but I am not doing blow with my dad. I feel like that's a bridge too far. You want to smoke a joint? You want to have a drink with dad? That's fine. Doing blow with Dennis Quaid? Sorry, folks. There are some things where Uncle Jerry has to say no, and that was a big N-O. So Dennis Quaid goes, he disappears. Things get quiet. I get my dab pens. All of a sudden, there is a calamity going on backstage. What I see is a woman who's probably in her late 60s come running out of the green room with a bloody nose. She's crying. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Dennis Quaid is screaming. And at this point, a lot of times I'll say, listen, I'll stick around to see the rest of the story. Guess what? I decided to turn off the channel, click off the TV, and go home. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what the fuck Dennis Quaid was up to. Well, I do know what he was up to, Bolivian marching powder. But I said to myself, there's no way. I'm not getting caught up in this. So I got my dab pens, said goodbye to my friend, and called it a night. I don't want to know how the rest of that night went. I'm sure it was legendary. It went down. But look, you hear stories about Guns N' Roses in the late 80s, early 90s. Okay. These are young guys in their prime. You hear about Led Zeppelin in the 70s. Crazy stories. Fine. Those guys were young in the prime. This is a 60-something-year-old Dennis Quaid doing blow with your grandmother. Listen, it's a bad scene, man. I'm out. I'm done. That's it. Checked out. So that happened at a prominent musical venue in New York. Figure it the fuck out. And that's my Dennis Quaid story. Not much to it, but I'm going to tell you something. If Dennis Quaid comes up to you and says, you want to do blow with him? Maybe you should do it. But I am too faint of heart. I'm too old. I'm in my 40s, and I would never do cocaine again. Cocaine is like the worst drug. It's for douchebags. It really is. Because you just sit around like grinding your jaw and being unhinged, and you feel like you're going to have a panic attack. You feel like your heart's going to stop, but you feel alive, baby. So I wonder why that marriage to Meg Ryan didn't work out. Here's a hint. Cocaine. Moving on. So excited. It's the week before Halloween, and there's nothing scarier than Dennis Quaid on cocaine, or is there? Do you guys know Devil's Night, my new favorite holiday, which is a reference from the movie The Crow? Very popular in Detroit because they used to set fires to that town, and it was insane. But Devil's Night was always October 30th. It is known as Mischief Night, when kids would get into trouble because they were excited for the debauchery that would go on during Halloween, All Hallows Eve. We used to do some bad things, and this is a story from back in the day. Short story, don't worry. We're getting to the episode. I know you're here for all the killer content, but this is a true Jerry Horror growing up story. I had a group of friends And we always looked up to the older kids. And the older kids were always so cool. You know, they had cars, they had like dirt bikes, they were always like badasses. So one night we were sitting around playing street hockey. And I was just like, I really wasn't playing. I was probably playing with my Game Boy because I'm a dumb little fat kid. And I'm like, I don't want to play street hockey. I just want to play with my Game Boy. Playing fucking Dr. Mario or something, which we mentioned on the Dr. Giggles episode. Sick plug. Go back and listen to that. Boom, boom. You know how we get down. So I'm sitting there and the older kids, there's one really cool older kid that we grew up with. He had a leather jacket. He kind of looked like Kid Rock. This guy, if you could imagine that. This kid never talked to me. And his name was Eric. Very cool dude. He had long hair. Again, he looked like Kid Rock, but like Kid Rock at 16 years old. He had a little shit stash. You know, I thought he was, wow, he's got a little shit stash. He's a cool guy. Comes up to me, never talked to me before. And he's like, you guys want to come out with us tonight? Me? With you? Sure. And I'm thinking, I must have been like 12 or 13, but this kid was like 16. And I'm thinking like, he's like so much older and so much cooler. We go out with him and his friends, and it's just like three of us, like two of my other friends, my friend Steve and my friend Pete. And we're like three little dumb kids in the back of this car, and we're driving around and we're listening to, you know, metal and shit like that, and just looking for something to do back in old Happy Hop Hog. Shout out to the Hop Hog crew. Shout out to the Slack Pack and the Gooligans, also from Hop Hog. Shout out to R.A. the Rugged Man, who does the intro at the top of the show, also a Hop Hog alumni. Aunt Becky, Lori Laughlin, also went to our school, which was pretty cool. That was the biggest celebrity. She used to go to the church that my mom used to go to. She went to St. Thomas More. Sick plug for that church. And I remember sitting there in church, and she sat down in front of us, like right around Easter time. And I was like, oh, wow, where's Dave Coulier? He did not show up. I don't think he's Catholic. I think he's Canadian, and I don't know what the fuck those people do up there. That's a weird godforsaken country. Those people are all strange. A lot of pornography, a lot of hockey, not quite sure. They like beer. They like Tim Hortons. I don't understand the Canadians. Also, Rush. Can we talk about Rush? Whatever. So I'm driving around with these kids. It's Devil's Night. And Eric says to me, hey man, we got some fucking M80s. M80s were like a quarter stick of dynamite. That's what you did. You played with that stuff. We used to light things on fire. I don't know. You know, you had to work for things back in the old days. Pornography came on VHS, you know, and things were tough back then. Things were different in the early 90s. So there was this woman, her name was Ginger, and she lived at the end of our block. And we used to hit baseballs, frisbees, whatever it was, and she wouldn't give them back. If it landed in her yard, she wouldn't give them back, and she wouldn't let us into her yard. So we thought that Devil's Night would be the ultimate way to pay back this bitch. So Eric says to me, hey, listen, man, take this M80 and you put it in her mailbox. Now, Ginger had a really nice mailbox. I mean, it was all made out of like cedar, and it looked like a little house and all this other stuff. He says, okay, so I'm going to break off this cigarette and we're going to use it as a delayed fuse. And this is like the first time I'm trying cigarettes, and I'm like, oh, I'm just fucking coughing everywhere. And he's like, all right. Also, I should probably preface that I lit it the wrong way, and I was smoking the filter and almost dying. I was the antithesis. Like if there was the Fonz and he's at the high range of cool, I'm like the opposite end of that. I'm like Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley. That's an old reference. Ask your grandmother. Ask your grandmother about Dennis Quaid's dick. So he says, we're going to take a delayed fuse. And I said, okay, so I'm so scared that I'm going to fuck this up. So I'm taking the cigarette, which now has no filter. I'm taking a few puffs, not inhaling, just like Bill Clinton at the time. And I put it on the end of the M80. And I am so scared because I'm thinking to myself, A, am I going to blow my hand off? B, am I going to look like a nerd in front of Eric and all his cool friends? These guys were like Todd from like Beavis and Butthead. They were like, oh my God, it's Todd. Todd's so cool. These guys were not cool. I don't even want to know where Eric ended up. He's probably in jail right now. What I didn't realize was that his other friends were doing the same thing in multiple mailboxes. And these people lived on my street, which is terrible and incriminating. One after the other, the mailboxes start blowing the fuck up, and it's an M80, and it's boom, it's loud. And I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, we just blew up Ginger's mailbox. I'm scared. So I go running to the car, dumb little fat kid. they peel off and leave me and Steve and Pete to fend for ourselves. What we didn't know was that his other friends were putting more M80s with cigarette fuses in the other mailboxes. So now they start going off because it's a delayed fuse. Boom, boom, boom. What are we going to do? I don't want to go home. We run into the woods because it was back in the old days before corporations tore down everything. You had woods. There were woods everywhere. We were in the woods. Ginger's mailbox not only explodes, but the post catches fire. And there is a gigantic fire that looks like, back in the old days, the Ku Klux Klan would put like burning crosses on people's lawns. It looks like this woman's got a burning cross on her lawn. All these mailboxes have exploded. Everybody is waking up. It's like 10 o'clock at night. People are outside. What the fuck is going on? More mailboxes. Boom, boom, going off. And I'm like, we're going to jail. I'm like, that's it. We're fucking 13 years old. We're all going to jail. We are scared. We're in the woods. We're sweaty. Where the fuck did Eric go? I don't know. People are coming out of their houses. We're watching her from the woods and she's throwing water. The flame is still going. Everybody's outside. The fucking fire department, which was around the block from my house, the fire trucks came out. The fire chief lived on my street. The fucking cops came because we lived in a small town and nothing ever happened. One guy, there was a mobster. There was that place, Il Pozo, the wishing well. There were guys who owned that. They were connected, and that guy got shot in the head. That's the only thing that ever happened in Hauppauge. I don't know where the bodies are buried, but that did happen. Regardless, the cops are there, and we're still hiding in the woods. So now Ginger's talking to the cops. So we decide, all right, we have to get back to our houses, but we can't cut through the woods because there's a fence that leads to a sump. I'm not like if there's dumb things, I had seen enough horror movies at that point not to go into the sump. I'm like, listen, we got to walk past these cops. We got to get back to our houses. I don't know why. And my friend Pete, he's saying we should stay in the woods. Steve is like, nah, let's go home. We walk past. Cops leave and we're going home. Ginger comes back out. She looks at us and she knows that we know that she knows we did it. And it was a terrible feeling. I hate this woman. Now, granted, she didn't give me back my Nerf boomerang, which that bitch still has my neon green glow in the dark Nerf boomerang. I'm sure she treasures it to this day. And she goes, you guys wouldn't know who did this, did you? And of course, I said, no, it's terrible. And I went home. And as we're getting closer to home, guess what? The police pull back around. And the cops say, hey, somebody blew up a bunch of mailboxes. You guys wouldn't know who did that, did you? No, I have no idea, officer. I couldn't possibly fathom the villainous scum behind this act of terror and tyranny. So he said, all right, well, we'll keep our eyes posted, but if you hear anything, let us know. Now, you want to know the unfortunate twist of this story. Well, guess what happened? Eric's mother was friends with Ginger. And Eric's mother found that he had a bunch of M80s. And she was a very Christian woman. And when she found this out, she knew that Eric had did it. So we come out, like the next Saturday, we're putting out our hockey net. And guess who's mowing the lawn over at Ginger's house? Eric, like a little bitch. And that, my friend, is what we call karmic justice. And we thought Eric was super cool, but guess what? That summer, Eric became Ginger's bitch, and he had to do all kinds of fucking yard work like Daniel's son from Miyagi. As cool as I thought Eric was, I realized just how corny and just how little of a man he was. And that's when I realized to myself, if somebody ever asks me to go do something that I don't want to do, I probably shouldn't. Even if it's to impress somebody, even if it's to impress a pretty girl or a cool older kid. Because you know what? The rest of that summer, Eric was out there washing her car and doing stuff. Because his mom, who was a very nice lady, knew that he blew up all the fucking mailboxes on that block. And that, folks, is Devil's Night. Or at least that's what Devil's Night used to be. Now kids just make TikToks of doing spooky dances. Oh, look, I'm Mr. Pumpkins from fucking Saturday Night Live and Tom Hanks. David S. Pumpkins. Is that a thing? No one gives a shit. It's fucking old. It is what it is. Folks, we got a hell of a show coming up. I hope that you have had a fun time listening to my stories about Dennis Quaid, Gazpacho's amazing review. Thank you, Gazpacho. We're going to get popping here, because we're going to go back to the year of our Lord 1989 to talk about Batman. No, just kidding. We're not going to talk about the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton classic movie. We're going to talk about something much worse. But you're going to have to stay tuned until after the break. We have to ask ourselves, in 1989, where was one Jean-Claude Van Damme? Well, Bloodsport had finally hit. And after the production disaster that film was, which we did in a previous season, sick plug, go back and listen to that one, Bloodsport was kind of a disaster, just to preface this. The first cut of the film was terrible. Luckily, Van Damme was able to get into the edit, recut the film, and make it work. Now, again, Bloodsport hit in 88, and it wasn't like an immediate thing. It opened slowly, territory by territory, all throughout the world. England got it at a different time than Japan got it, and it had become this kind of cultural touchstone. Like, people are like, yo, this is like the best martial arts movie since Enter the Dragon. This guy, I don't know who this guy is. I think he's French. He does martial arts. He's amazing. So the thing was, we didn't really have a follow-up, back in the old days, I told you, the way this always worked was you made a hit movie, you went right into production on the next movie. But because Bloodsport had sat on a shelf for about a year and a half, nobody knew just how big of a hit it would become, especially the folks at Cannon Pictures, but we'll get there. So Van Damme was able to do a movie called Black Eagle with Japanese star Sho Kusoji, who was in a bunch of different movies. He was in the ninja movies. He was in Enter the Ninja. He was the bad guy. He was in Revenge of the Ninja. That's a great movie. That's a solid recommend to anybody, is Revenge of the Ninja. Go watch that. It's another Canon movie. He did Ninja 3, The Domination. A lot of ninja movies, cashing in on the ninja craze. Black Eagle, he's like a retired special forces guy from Japan. Van Damme is the bad guy in that movie. Van Damme didn't want to do that movie because he was still waiting for Bloodsport to pay off. He's like, dude, he believed in it. He's like, this movie's going to hit. I know once people see Bloodsport, it's going to be a big, big hit. So he told Kusuji, he said to him, listen, I know you're going to kill me. I know I'm the bad guy in this movie. Can you kill me off screen? So he was like, all right, I'm going to be the bigger man and kind of grant you that. Because truth be told, he didn't want to have Sho beat him in a fight. Because back in the old days, it used to devalue you. If you were an actor in action movies and stuff, they would make you look weak. There's even a whole thing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Leonardo DiCaprio is talking to Al Pacino as the producer, and he says, you can go make movies in Italy where they'll let you win the fights. And that's a big deal because that's the way it worked. That's the way it works in pro wrestling. You know, you want to look strong because if your character looks strong, it's kind of like Dwayne Johnson or even Steven Seagal. These guys don't lose fights. Sometimes they don't even get bloody because they always have to be the shining star, you know, which goes back to the whole Fast Five thing where Vin Diesel couldn't hit The Rock as many times as The Rock hit him. And then Dwayne Johnson's agent basically said, listen, he'll give it as good as he gets it, but he cannot be made to look weaker than Vin Diesel. And that's where the problems start with that franchise, which eventually we'll get to. It's down the road. Van Damme is prepping for Kickboxer, which would be his final Cannon film. Because initially, when they signed him on at Cannon, they said, you're going to do 3 pictures for us, contractually. Because that's how Menachem and Yoram worked over there. They said, if, you got a hit picture, you do a bunch of different pictures for us. And if one hits, well, whatever, we'll cut you out of the contract. But if the movie does hit, we've got you under contract for 2 more pictures, which was very advantageous and very savvy of Cannon to do. We know that Kickboxer wasn't really a go picture, and Mark DeSalle, who went on to direct The Perfect Weapon, had Jeff Speakman, a sick plug for The Perfect Weapon, who auditioned for Kickboxer. But he's like, this guy just isn't right. We need to find the right person to be the titular Kickboxer. So Cannon goes back. Menachem Golan, one of my idols, says, Van Damme, how would you like to be the star of American Ninja 3? Van Damme says, you mean the ones with Michael Dudikoff? And he's like, yeah, you could be the star. He's like, you just take it over. He's like, Dudikoff's going to go do River of Death and Avenging Force. He'll do other pictures. He goes, this is good. People like ninjas. And Van Damme was like, but you got to cover my face with the ninja mask, right? And he's like, yeah. He goes, well, it's not going to work. All right. So how about this? We got another one, because this is how producers work, especially 2 Israeli guys like Menachem and Yoram. Menachem says to him, how about we team you up with Chuck Norris in Delta Force 2, The Colombian Connection? And he says, yeah. He's like, now what's crazy is Van Damme found Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris really liked Van Damme. He thought he was a crazy person. He showed up at Chuck Norris's house one day and was like, listen, I can do all this stuff. And he says, all right. So Chuck gave him a job at a restaurant that he worked at. He would train and spar with Van Damme, and he even let him sleep over in one of his guest houses. So one day he says, look, he goes, I'll introduce you to Menachem. So he introduces Van Damme to Menachem Golan, and he does the 360 helicopter kick over his head. And he says, I got all these skills. And that's how he got Bloodsport. But you can listen all about that in the previous episode. I'll pass. Chuck's the star. He goes, but it'll be good. He goes, you do the picture with Chuck and it'll make you look good. You'll be on the same playing field. And he says, but I'll be playing second banana because Chuck Norris's name will be above mine. See, now he understands. Van Damme understands. He's got nothing. This guy's got nothing. He doesn't have a pot to piss in. He's broke. He's sleeping on Chuck Norris's couch. And the reality of it is he knows that he's got to do something where he's the star. Enter Cyborg.
Welcome to the world of the not-too-distant future. Get going! Go! A brutal gang is reshaping the world into their own vision of hell. And only one man can stop them. Jean-Claude Van Damme is leading the battle between good and evil.
Take him out.
As it's never been fought before. He's on a desperate mission to rescue a cyborg who holds the secret for saving the world.
Why did you help me?
I don't want to see you die.
From the dust of destruction rises the warrior of a new age.
Say goodbye, my friend.
Jean-Claude Van Damme has become the first hero of the 21st century. Cyborg.
Cyborg started as a sequel to Masters of the Universe because, well, the rights were running out. Quite frankly, everybody was upset because the film was a disaster. Unmitigated. They ran out of money. Those were some of the biggest sets that they ever built for Masters of the Universe, for Eternia. Basically, Cannon had this deal where Mattel had to kick up a certain amount of the budget to help out with the production. And they kind of balked. The first movie didn't work out. I think we're just going to pass on a sequel. Albert Pune, who is, he's made some of the greatest genre movies of all time. He made the canon Captain America. He's done Nemesis. He's done so many movies. Literally, he's done so many movies. We can't even get into that. We might have to do a special director series posthumously on Albert Pune because his filmography is insane. The guy was making one movie a month for, I want to say, almost 10 years. It's incredible. So he's developing Spider-Man. they're going to do Spider-Man with Cannon. And this is like, I want to say 1988. He says, all right, you have to have Dr. Octopus in the movie. And Albert's like, dude, we can't, the technology's just not there. I don't even know how we would do Dr. Octopus. He goes, what we could do is we could do a guy in makeup and we could do the Lizard. And the Lizard will be the bad guy. Who is the Lizard? I do not want the Lizard. You give me Dr. Octopus, you give me Green Goblin. That's what I want. We can't afford it. He flies on this thing. We can't afford it. So he says, well, what's the cheapest option? The Lizard. We do the Lizard. And that's how things went at Cannon. So they start building sets. And they began testing effects for Spider-Man. They're deep into this. They're like months into this, figuring out how it's going to work. And at a certain point, Michael Dudikoff is going to play Spider-Man, even though Michael Dudikoff is fucking 30 years old. And we're going to do an origin story about Spider-Man. He goes to Menachem and he says, if we do the thing with the spider and the origin story, it's going to be too expensive. How about we start? He's Spider-Man. And he goes, but how do people know? He goes, it doesn't matter. He's been Spider-Man for a while. Everybody knows who he is. He'll be fine. I'll tell you what. You go work on Masters of the Universe sequel. He says, but I've been working on Spider-Man for the last 3 months and developing the effects. No. We have to do Masters of the Universe because the rights run out. And if the rights run out, we cannot make sequel. Now they had just lost the rights to Superman 4 because Warner Brothers saw Superman 4, they cut the budget, they ran out of money. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, and Masters of the Universe are essentially why Cannon Pictures went out of business because they had signed on and they had sunk so much money into these movies. They were hoping that both of those films would save the studio. The real shining light was Bloodsport. Bloodsport was really what was going to save it. And luckily, we had 2 more pictures with Van Damme. It was only then that Cannon realized, wait a second, Mattel's never kicking up the money. So Yoram and Menachem, they call Mattel, and they said, listen, if you give us this much money, we'll do a direct-to-video sequel. So Mattel says, all right, you want to go direct-to-video, we'll do it. You guys still have the rights. So what Mattel does is, Mattel just keeps jerking their chain, and they're like, we don't want them to make a sequel. We want these rights to pass. They've got like a year before they run out and they can make a sequel. But Cannon's thinking, wait a second, we put all this money into the marketing of the first movie. It's got a built-in audience with the toy line. We'll make a direct-to-video, cheap, quickie sequel, and we'll still be able to make more money. So at the last minute, Mattel just says, look, we don't want to do it. Let's just not make a He-Man sequel. But I built the sets. And this was very true. They did build these post-apocalyptic sets because essentially He-Man was going to go to this other planet and it was going to be like Earth 2. And Earth 2 was destroyed and he was going to team up with a young boy and they were going to save Earth 2. That was I don't know. It was a terrible, terrible idea. Fun fact, Laird Hamilton was not Dolph Lundgren. We can't afford Dolph Lundgren. So we're getting Laird Hamilton, great looking guy. He was a professional surfboarder, fitness guy. And he was going to play He-Man. And they were going to have him with this little kid on like a Mad Max type of Earth. And it wouldn't be Skeletor. We can't afford Frank Langella to come back. Stan Lee, who gave them the rights to Spider-Man, personally called Cannon. And he says, Menachem, I told them for a little bit of extra money, I'll let you keep the rights to Spider-Man because Marvel in the late 80s, early 90s was in a bad way. And they were pretty much on the precipice of going bankrupt. He would let them keep the rights for another year because he needed the money. And Stan said, look, we're strapped for cash. But unfortunately, Cannon's cash had run out because of Superman 4's problems. So plans for the Spider-Man movie had been canceled. So he goes to all these special effects artists and he says, no more Spider-Man. No more Spider-Man. We're doing He-Man. And they said, but we don't have the rights for He-Man either. Well, they got a problem. So now we've got no He-Man sequel and we've got no Spider-Man movie. What the fuck? What are we going to do? We're in a pinch. We're in a bind. This is where it gets a little bit ugly. Marvel and Mattel had their lawyers order cease and desist to make sure that the films did not get into production. Because what Menachem would do was he figured if he could get the Masters of the Universe sequel, if he could start filming, he could kind of lie to them and say, oh, we're shooting the footage. Look, we make a movie. You have to. he was going to try to extend the rights and at least get the film made, call it something else, and then market it somewhere else in the world. Cannon tried to pull another fast one, but the lawyers over at Marvel and Mattel were like, this ain't happening. So, Cannon is now $2 million in the hole because they were developing both films, the Spider-Man and the Master sequel. So like any good frugal producer, Menachem says, we have all these leftover sets we built. Let's just make an original movie. Okay, now we got an idea. Now we're cooking with gas. Albert says, all right, give me Chuck Norris. I want him to star in Cyborg. Yeah, I'm not going to give you the money for Chuck. You don't have money for Chuck. Okay, well, maybe I can get Chuck Norris interested and bring him on as a producer. We'll tell him he's like, we're going to do a Mad Max post-apocalyptic thing, and it'll be really cool. We'll use all the bombed out sets of New York, and we'll use the sets from Masters, and we'll use all the props, and we can reuse it all, and we'll use it in the movie, and it'll be great. They go to Chuck. Chuck says, I need $2 million to do this movie. Oh, no. I just lost $2 million. How am I going to give Mr. Norris $2 million? So he says, you know what we do? We get Van Damme. People love Bloodsport. We get him in the sequel. We get a good movie. And he's also much cheaper because he was still under contract for 2 pictures. So he didn't have a choice. He had to do these 2 pictures because now Bloodsport hits and Van Damme is getting offered other movie roles for other things. Now, the only catch, Van Damme says, I will do your movie, sir, but I need control over the stunts and the fight sequences as well as the edit. Yeah. You do the edit, you do kicks, whatever. You just go and make a movie. I saved Bloodsport, Menachem, and I can save Cyborg. Well, the problem here is, to be quite frank with you, the budget for Cyborg was $500,000, which, folks, if you've ever tried to make a movie, or if you're a filmmaker yourself, shooting a big budget science fiction spectacle for $500,000 with Jean-Claude Van Damme, I don't know if you're going to be able to pull that off. That's kind of it's a little tough there, might not be able to pull it off. We're basically getting all these guys who had been working on Masters, they're working on Spider-Man, and they said, all right, we're going to do it. We got $500,000, we got like 20 days, and we're going to put together this movie. Albert Pune didn't even have a final script. Originally, the script was called Slinger, and it was going to be a more moody piece where it was kind of like the existential crisis of living in the post-apocalyptic future. We see Mad Max, we see the combat, we can't afford that. Let's talk about the effect it has on people. Unfortunately, when you got a guy who's not known for his English or acting, but known for spin kicks, probably not the best idea. You call me crazy. So the first week of shooting, Jackson Rock Pickney, who played one of Fender's pirates, the bad guy in this movie, he lost an eye during filming when Van Damme accidentally stuck his eye with a prop knife. Pickney sued Van Damme in a North Carolina court and was awarded $500,000, which was how much Cyborg cost. And unfortunately, because it was under Cannon's insurance, now Cannon had spent $500,000 to make the movie and another $500,000 to give this guy, this poor stuntman, who got his eye poked out. Cannon is dying a slow death, and pretty much the only thing that's keeping the lights on is stuff like Death Wish 4, The Crackdown, Chuck Norris is missing in Action 3. Say what you will about those movies, but they make money. And it's crazy because the Cannon people had those folks under contract, and those movies didn't cost much, and they made a lot of money. It was only when they tried to play the big dick game and be like, we're going to make Superman, we're going to make He-Man, that's where they lose all the money. So after that 1-2 punch of a disaster that were those films, Cannon is deeply in debt. At this point, they even get involved with the mob, and they're borrowing money and bouncing checks. It's really, really a disaster.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
Attention horror movie buffs. Remember the good old days Back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. Their meticulously curated collection has something for every horror enthusiast, from timeless classics to the latest releases, stuff that will keep you up at night.
But Jerry, why should I choose Mailbox Movies?
Well, let me tell you why. Mailbox Movies has an extensive horror DVD selection that you won't find anywhere else. I'm going through the website right now, scrolling down and perusing their available catalog. Not only do they have some of my favorite genre films that I absolutely love, some we've even covered on The Offering, like Scream 2, Halloween H2O, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. But they've even got greater flicks like Trick or Treat, 13 Ghosts, Feast, a whole lot more. You will not believe the selection. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Remember to use the promo code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your terrifying movie marathon today. Knows Best Candles is a soy wax candle company owned by two Long Island natives turned Manhattanites. They hand pour small batches of cheeky candles that inspire the euphoric feeling of synesthesia. They've got diffusers, room sprays, bundles, and gift cards are always available as well. Each Knows Best candle pairs an enchanting dual fragrance with a curated Spotify playlist to help set your mood at home. Not to mention, the names of the candles are a conversation starter themselves. Bestsellers include Safe Word, Midday Nap, and my personal favorite, Bitch Goddess. The perfect scents to burn while listening to your favorite podcast. That's right, The Offering. Remember to use promo code JerryHorror20 to automatically save 20% off your order. Stop paying for overpriced basic bitch candles. Spoil yourself or your loved ones with Knows Best candles. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or a story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhorror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. Albert Pune was born in Hawaii. People have called him the Ed Wood of kickboxing science fiction movies, which is kind of true. His first film was The Sword and the Sorcerer, which made $36 million in the United States. And if you've never seen it, it's actually pretty good. Richard Lynch is the bad guy in that one. He did Radioactive Dreams, which was a hit. He did Alien from LA, which was like another hit and ended up being a classic on Mystery Science Theater 3000. I can't even begin to tell you. If we go on to Pune's filmography, it is absolutely insane. You ready for this, folks? Because buckle up. Captain America, Kickboxer 2, Blood Match, Arcade, Knights, Brain Smasher, A Love Story, which was the one with Andrew Dice Clay where he smashes people's brains. Real story. Not a good movie, but entertaining. Doll Man, Nemesis, Hong Kong 97, Heat Seeker. Heat Seeker is a definite recommend. It is about a kickboxing cyborg. A lot of kickboxing, a lot of cyborgs. If it works once, it'll work 12 times. He did Kickboxer 4. He did all those Nemesis movies. He did Ravenhawk, Urban Menace, The Wrecking Crew, Bullet Face. Interstellar, Civil War, Ticker, Mean Guns. Listen, this guy made a lot of movies, and I gotta tell you, most of them are pretty bad. Nemesis is good, but we'll get to that later. Essentially, they put together this movie in 20 days, and I'm telling you, they rip off everything. Everything in this movie is just a ripoff. Even we're watching it now, and there's the scene where Van Damme is pretty much crucified. That's essentially from Conan the Barbarian, because they do the same thing to Conan, except Conan bites that vulture, and he really did it in real life, which is disgusting. Problems with this movie was that it almost initially, let me get to this. So they put together a rough cut of what they've shot in 20 days. And again, if you've ever made a movie, 20 days is not exactly a super quick turnaround time. They put together the movie. Albert Pune, he says, no, we're going to do the film negatives in black and white. And they're sitting there and they're watching this movie, this first cut, and it's in black and white. And they're showing it to a test audience, and people start walking out because, again, he's using this slow, methodical form of storytelling. The music is very sweeping and it's very understated at the same time. And it's this story about this guy named Rickenbacker, which is a terrible name for a hero. And Rickenbacker is in the post-apocalypse, and he had a family, and he protects people, and he's going to protect the cyborg and take her to Atlanta because they're going to use her for the cure for this disease. A lot of the movie, look, there's this isn't even a movie. It's a bunch of ideas hanging around a movie. Menachem says, I don't care what you do, re-edit movie and put in color. Nobody is going to see this movie in black and white. So they recut it, they put it in color, Van Damme steps in and he says, listen, he goes, I don't give a shit what you do with this movie, Albert, but you got to make me look good. So he goes, I'm going to be doing some splits, I'm going to be showing my ass, and I'm going to kick some people in the face, and we're going to call it a day. And he goes, I don't care what's in the rest of this movie, but I can't look bad because I've got other movies lined up. And that's when Mark DeSalle comes to Van Damme and says, listen, I think you should just leave. He goes, walk away from this, please, and come do Kickboxer. I think Kickboxer is a perfect thing for you. We did it on Bloodsport. Let's do it better. Let's do it bigger. I got some money. We're going to shoot it in Thailand. It's going to be great. So Van Damme is like, I need to get to Thailand and shoot Kickboxer. And Albert Pune is like, listen, I really screwed the pooch here. We only had 20 days to shoot. Can you come back? Can you do some reshoots on this film? And Van Damme says, all right, well, I started this with you. I'm going to finish it with you. So they do a bunch of reshoots. They add some more blood. They add some more fights, some more violence, and they recut the picture. Menachem says, okay, this is a good enough picture. There's people, whatever, they'll go see this because it's got all this stuff in it. So the violent scenes were heavily cut from this film to gain an R rating rather than an X, including a throat-slitting scene where Van Damme slowly slits the throat of a villain. There was some blood and gore during the initial village massacre in the opening. Also excised was the death of a man that Van Damme was fighting, which caused an inconsistency in the film that made it look like Van Damme had magically just disappeared after kicking a guy in the face. Like the edit was so bad that it was incomprehensible. Yeah. So they submitted the movie about 4 times to the MPAA in order to get an R rating to essentially get this film into theaters, which, to be honest with you, was quite a struggle, to say the least. The way that I came to know this movie was the comic book. To coincide with the film's home video release, Cannon published a one-shot comic book. And the narration largely follows the action of the film. And although the final fight, like you get to the end of the comic book and Van Damme's Rickenbacker is about to fight Fender. And essentially what happens is the comic book starts and it's like, if you want to know the ending, you got to go rent the movie. And this is like a classic Menachem move. You make comic book, but comic book not show end of movie. You just get... So I was sitting there. I still have this comic book. It's amazing. I'll take some photos for social media. But I loved it. And it was so cool to me because I loved Van Damme and I loved Bloodsport. And I was like, this is him in a comic book format. Credited to author Noah Cirque and artists Mike Van Cleve and Pete Von Schally. It features some behind-the-scenes articles and interviews. what's interesting about the comic book is they talked to Albert Pune, and they were like, so show us some of the tech that you were going to use in the movie. They had all these things, like stuff that the Lizard was going to use in Spider-Man, but they couldn't get any of this shit to work. And there was this whole thing, there's this whole subplot in the movie where they have guns that run on gasoline, and that they're trying to find more gasoline to fuel the guns so they can take over. And that whole subplot is cut out of the movie because they didn't have the time or the money to make it happen. Cyborg's not a good movie. It's barely a recommend, but if you're a Van Damme fan, you know damn well that you got to see it because he's the man. Everybody was waiting for this. Again, this is the follow-up to Bloodsport, and Bloodsport was so good. Whatever, how can we not wait for this? And even like right now, we're watching the final fight, and this was when my dad explained to me about how these guys would get a pump and then appear in front of the screen. Because you look at Van Damme like, oh, he's in great shape. But then when you get to this final scene, and they're fighting in the rain, and it's just so epic. And it's totally worth the price of admission to get to the final fight, to the fight with Vincent Klin, who plays Fender in this movie, who everybody, oh, by the way, everybody in this movie is named after guitars. Rickenbacker is a guitar. Fender is a guitar. So every character in this movie is named after a guitar because Albert Pune loved guitars. He was such a sweet man. Fortunately, my dad explains to me, these guys, they lift weights. My dad and my Uncle Bob used to lift weights in the basement, my Uncle Bob's house, and they really introduced me because now, like, I lift weights and I love it. I've been doing it for almost a year. I just love it. They would show me, be like, look at Uncle Bob. He's got his shirt off, right? Like, this is kind of weird, right? This was my childhood. So my dad would be like, look at his arms. Now, Uncle Bob's going to lift. He's going to do biceps. Look how big his biceps get. Look at the veins and everything. I can't believe this sounds so sinister that I'm in my uncle's basement looking at my uncle's biceps, but this is how I learned how to lift weights. I was like, oh my God. So Van Damme and Stallone aren't that big. Well, they're that big, but they don't look like that every day. They only look like that when they've got a pump. Go to my Instagram. You can see what I look like. When I have a pump, I look like I'm gigantic. In normal street clothes, I just look like a schlub, but it is what it is. That's the secret. Now, Menachem had heard that Batman would be coming out in June, and he was going to release Cyborg in June. And he says, no. Batman's going to make all the money. There'll be no money for Cyborg. We have to push release. So they have to really work hard to get this movie that was shot in 20 days recut again and get it out to theaters. Comes out April 7th of 1989 on a budget of $500,000. It made $10.2 million, which was a lot of money for Cannon. Like, Cannon's movies usually made like $5 million. So for that, it was like, wow. And largely, it was sold on Van Damme. Like, if you watch the trailers for this movie, it says the star of Bloodsport returns in a new shocking vision of the future. Now, little fat kid Jerry's watching that and he's like, wow, Van Damme kicked ass in the past, but now he's coming to the future. I was so excited. I had the official comic book tie-in where I didn't know what would happen. And of course, like every other dumb little fat kid in shorts, I was at the cinemas April 7th because I begged my dad. And my dad said, we'll go see it. Because that was usually my dad's response to these action films. Now, home video. Let me tell you, brother, about home video. It was one of Cannon's biggest successes, making over $18 million in VHS sales. So now, this movie had made close to almost $30 million. It was big, but it wasn't enough because Cannon was in so much financial debt that it could not save the company. Cyborg's not a good movie, okay? It just isn't. I'd like to pretend that it is. This movie like runs 90 minutes, and there are so many scenes that are in slow motion in order to pad the running time. And what's even worse is there's this whole thing where like Van Damme was taking care of this woman and her family, and then Fender kills them, and that's why he comes back for revenge and to take the cyborg, Pearl, which you thought that the cyborg, in a movie called fucking Cyborg, I thought Van Damme was going to be like the Terminator. He'd be the Terminator that kicks people in the face, which is eventually what Pune does with Heat Seeker. Again, Heat Seeker's a pretty good movie. If you've ever wanted to see a movie about a cyborg that kickboxes people to death, have I got a picture for you. It's called Heat Seeker. Good luck trying to find it. You can find it on YouTube. Don't tell anybody. is it's illegally there. Totally watch Heatseeker. Critical reception. Cyborg received a generally negative reception from critics despite the box office success. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reports a 22% positive score based on 18 critical reviews. Its average rating is 3.5 out of 10 on Metacritic, and the film had a weighted average score, 24 critics out of 100, based on 8 critics. Okay, look, I can't do the math here, but let me tell you, generally unfavorable reviews. Not very. And guess what? Roger Ebert, Siskel, they didn't review this movie. Nobody, no major outlets really reviewed Cyborg. If you watched Bloodsport and you loved Bloodsport, you were going to go see this movie. With all this being said, Cannon was doomed. Really, there was no move for them, but we'll get back to that in a second. What was JCVD's next move? See, now, he does Kickboxer, and Kickboxer is a huge hit. It kind of even propels him further because Kickboxer makes like almost $15 million, which is a lot. It's Bloodsport money. He finds Sunil Shah, and Mr. Shah was with Imperial Films. He was a filmmaker and distributor from the Middle East, and essentially he made a lot of low-budget action movies, but he said to Van Damme, "I'll give you $6 million. And we'll make Lionheart." Lionheart starts filming, and Shaw was smart enough to bring the people from Universal Pictures down. And they said, "Listen, you spend the $6 million and we'll distribute this film." Lionheart was probably the biggest release that Van Damme had to that point. It opened on 2,000 screens, so that was huge for old JCVD. Now, the success of the film, with Lionheart making over $30 million on that $6 million budget. And this is to the point where Universal says, "Hey, look, we're going to sign you to a deal. You come to us and we're going to make a bunch of different movies." And that's down the line. That happens. He does Universal Soldier. But what happens with Van Damme up until Time Cop, which becomes his first $100 million movie, every Van Damme movie up until like 1996, when Street Fighter comes out, each one made more and more and more money. And the problem is, when you're an actor and you have an ego and you're a star, if you keep making money each time, people think like, okay, A, he's a sure bet, but B, we can't lose because every movie this guy makes more money. And that's when Universal signed him to a 6-picture deal. Is Cyborg a franchise non-starter? Because that's what we're covering this season. Sort of. Originally, because this movie had made Cannon so much money, they had developed, this was probably Menachem and Yoram sitting around saying to themselves, "All right, we're going to make a trilogy." And they were going to bring Van Damme back, and they were going to use the second picture, which would end up becoming Kickboxer, which would have been the third picture in his deal, to get him back for a Cyborg 3. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Actually, fortunately, it didn't happen because nobody wanted that sequel. Cyborg had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 sequels. The second movie has Jack Palance and Angelina Jolie in it, and it has nothing to do with the original Cyborg. And Cyborg 3 and 4 have nothing to do. They're all like these, they were basically just took the name, and they're all sort of about a cyborg, but they have nothing to do with each other. Honestly, they're terrible. Unless you want to see like 16-year-old Angelina Jolie get yelled at by Jack Palance for an hour and a half, you're not missing anything. Now, the death of Cannon. Death Warrant would be produced by Cannon, but picked up ultimately and distributed by MGM because Cannon was in such a bad place that they didn't have the money to do the advertising for Death Warrant. That's the one where Van Damme goes to prison. It's Van Damme in prison, all right? We know what's going to happen. I like Death Warrant. It's good when he fights this guy, the Sandman. Now, depending on who you ask, the last Cannon film theatrically distributed was 1993's American Cyborg, Steel Warrior, which is a real movie that really came out. It starred Joe Lara, and Joe Lara was this guy who was in a bunch of different movies. He was in Tango and Cash, he was in Double Impact, and he was usually a bad guy. He's got long hair, it's greasy, he's kind of Italian looking. He's an Italian guy. And he could do kickboxing, but the guy had the charisma of a wet mop. But what Yoram and Menachem assumed, they said, we get Joe Lara. Joe Lara is new Van Damme. Joe Lara was, it's like Boogie Nights. They get that guy that replaces, Mark Wahlberg's character, and it's never the same. Johnny Doe. Yeah, you try to get a Johnny Doe, and essentially Joe Lara is Johnny Doe. Joe Lara. And again, we're recycling ideas. You put Cyborg, you put Warrior in title, movie sell. Joe Lara, next Van Damme. Let's go. And guess what? It didn't. Because American Cyborg Steel Warrior had empty showings. Nobody went to go see this movie. In fact, some theaters pulled the movie after 2 days because the theaters were empty. Like literally, no one saw this movie. Now, this is a fact. The last direct-to-video film by Cannon was the doomed 1993 Jeff Speakman vehicle, Street Night. Because after he lost his deal with Paramount, he was kind of desperate to do something after The Perfect Weapon. And they came along and they said, we give you same money. Jeff Speakman, we give you same money as Chuck Norris. We give him $2 million a movie. We give Jeff Speakman $2 million. Street Night is not a good movie. It's got Bernie Casey in it. There's some great fight scenes, but it's a terrible movie. I've tried to rewatch it. I'm not putting on the rose-colored glasses because I'm a fan of Master Speakman. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's amazing. It's a shitty film. Spiritual sequel. Now, Albert Pune, and I will argue this is Albert Pune's greatest original film because he wrote this one, he directed it. It's Nemesis. It's 1992. This is his follow-up to Cyborg. It's about a troubled cyborg cop named Alex, played by Olivier Grunier. And if you don't know, Olivier Grunier does a style called savate, which is a French kickboxing style. This guy's English is terrible too. And he's a good-looking guy. He's a great martial artist, but we had this success with Van Damme, so he's another Johnny Doe. We're trying to get that going. So he's ordered to apprehend his former partner, Jared. Wow. Jared, huh? This is the guy from Subway. Accused of smuggling data to information terrorists plotting to kill government officials. Don't worry about the plot in Nemesis. The reason Nemesis works is because Albert Pune had seen a bunch of John Woo movies. He rips off John Woo. He's got Olivier Grunier. He's got Kari Hikura Tagawa as the bad guy. He's got a lot of great actors padding the whole thing out. It's insane, but it's got all these crazy action sequences. Grunier is a good stand-in for Van Damme because it was supposed to be Nemesis started as a sequel to Cyborg, where Van Damme would get artificially enhanced and then go on these adventures. But whatever, I digress. Now, even though it's the spiritual sequel, dig this, folks, and fucking strap in. There was Nemesis 2 Nebula, Nemesis 3, which is also Nemesis 3 The Recycler, aka Pray Harder, and Nemesis 4 Death Angel, all made by Albert Pune. Now, this is where it gets weird, right? I don't know how the fuck we got here, but we're here. There is a woman, I forget her name, it doesn't matter. She's a bodybuilder, big buff chick, barely got any tits because she's on a ton of steroids. She's the star of these movies. She's the star of 2, 3, and 4, Nemesis movies. Albert Pune was married man, but he put her in these movies and he was essentially having an affair with this woman. Some people, they cheat on their wives. They go to Atlantic City. They go sleep with another woman. What does Albert Pune do? Director Albert Pune decides, I'm going to make 3 movies back to back with this bodybuilder. And let me tell you something. Nemesis 2 isn't that bad. It's ridiculous, but it's still terrible. But it's not even recommended. If you like seeing a half-naked bodybuilding woman beat people up and blow things up, have I got a series of films for you. And you know what? These fucking stupid Nemesis movies, they made money. Because guess what? Someone bought the rights to Nemesis 5 and called it Nemesis 5, The New Model. And it's directed by Dustin Ferguson, who brought us such hits as Space Sharks, Amityville Clown House, Ebola Rex, Cocaine Cougar, Mega Ape, and the memorable hit Big Freaking Snake. These are real films. Dustin Ferguson is a real person. Nemesis 5, The New Model, is available on Tubi and a bunch of the other ones. It is fucking terrible. The only thing it has in common is that There are cyborgs, allegedly, because we can't afford no effects for cyborgs. The movie looks like shit. It makes no sense. It rips off The Matrix. Nemesis 5, the new model, might be one of the worst fucking movies I've ever seen. And I sat there through the whole thing, and let me tell you folks, I am fucking dumber for it, and I recommend that you never watch Nemesis 5, the new model, or any of Dustin Ferguson's films. And you know what's going to be crazy? I'm going to be interviewing him next season. But, oh, Dustin, you're a fucking Amityville clown house. How did you do it? No, I'm not. Producer Pete, I have to draw the line. You know, we're doing this director series with talented directors. I am not doing Dustin Ferguson. Coming up next week on the offering, Dustin Ferguson, director of Amityville Clown House. One last thing, because we got to do one last thing for this. In 2011, director Albert Pune's Kernan Pictures got a hold of the missing tapes of the original cut of Cyborg. You know, the black and white cut. So Pune had his friend, score artist Tony Rapardi, who is also a big fan of guitars, and they put this score underneath the film, and it's just all guitars. There's no drums, it's just all guitars. The movie's in black and white. It's re-edited, and it was commercially available. He called it Slinger, okay? And it's a recut version of Cyborg in black and white with all the moody stuff thrown in. All the kicks and the other shit is gone. It's ridiculous. You could only buy this through Albert Pune himself. Unfortunately, Albert Pune would pass away a few years later from cancer. He was suffering from dementia. It was really sad because this was a guy who, he made a lot of shitty movies, but I'll tell you what, they were entertaining. He's got some gems. There's some gems in there, not really, but he made a lot of movies, and there was a lot of kickboxing, a lot of cyborgs, and a lot of naked female bodybuilders. And you know what? God bless him. God bless Albert Pune. I think he's a fucking genius because you know what? He worked consistently for over 30 years and he made a lot of movies and most of them sucked. But you know what? I don't know. He got to be with all those big female bodybuilders. Hey kids, are you ready? It's time for my favorite part of the show. Unhinged reviews. Are you ready? Are you ready, kids? Here we go. Alina and James Worth. Now this is so weird. This one comes again from Amazon. But so I'm assuming that Alina and James are a married couple. They're sharing the same last name. I assume that they collaborated on this review. 1 out of 5 stars, verified purchase. When quality doesn't count, you can count on Van Damme. Cyborg is a typical Van Damme movie. All the action you can handle and none of the quality you deserve. You get the typical splits and man buttocks sweetness from Van Damme that you would expect. Somehow Van Damme on foot is faster than a tugboat. Yes, that is true. Also, open fields and grass-covered savanna-like areas have manholes and massive labyrinth-like systems below. Hey, it's the post-apocalyptic future. I'm sorry. Look, I don't want to be a dick here, but, you know, all right, whatever. You do get an unexpectedly nice mullet on the main villain as well as some top-notch dialogue. All in all, you're forcing yourself to watch the entire Van Damme catalog. You're going to have to watch this one, too. I don't want to digress, but this review goes off the rails when he says, generally shipping is about to be 25% higher than the price of the movie itself, so you win on all fronts. Be a man, give yourself what you deserve, watch Cyborg. Now, when you've got an unhinged review that's that good and tells you that you're going to save 25% on shipping, I mean, how can we not? What a deal. Dude, what the fuck are we doing, man? This guy's telling us about saving... fucking Pete, man. My fucking head's gonna explode. This guy who reviews the fucking movie and tells me that I'm gonna get a discount on shipping. I don't fucking tell me what the movie's about. I mean, the movie isn't about much. You get to see Van Damme's ass. He does a split. He does some spin kicks. Boom, bing, ba. We're home in time to watch another movie because that's what Cyborg is. It's fucking filler. Cyborg is basically, it's like your grandmother in the Great Depression. We don't have money for food. So we're going to take a bunch of shit that we've got in the kitchen. Oh, we got some pork. We got some noodles. We got some of this. And we're going to throw in a pot. And guess what? That's what's for dinner. Cyborg is the leftover baby of Masters of the Universe 2, Spider-Man, and whatever the hell else they had lying around at the time. I'm telling you, I swear to God, Van Damme must have owed some money for something or somebody to be in this movie. Well, he did have the 3-picture deal with Cannon. Unfortunately, no matter what they did, whether it was Death Wish 4 or Cyborg, nothing was going to save Cannon, and it died a really horrible death. By the time you hit 94, it's just out of business. With that being said, the death of Cannon will eventually be something that I'd like to cover down the road, but it's expansive. Maybe someday if we ever start a Patreon or something of that nature, we could figure out exactly where they went wrong. I can tell you where they went wrong. I'll save you the $5 on Patreon. You shouldn't have fucking produced Superman 4, and you shouldn't have produced Masters of the Universe. You took the big swings. Sometimes they don't pay off. My conclusion on Cyborg is this, and it's very simple. While it's not a classic, there's something charmingly low-tech about the film. This is a movie that used to play on TBS all the time. It was a movie for guys who liked movies. You see some boobs, you see some of Van Damme's butt, you see him do a couple of kicks, all right, that's it. There's nothing more, nothing less to it. Any nostalgia that you have of this movie as a kid, one of my friends that I used to lift weights with, my friend Brendan, was like, man, I love Cyborg. Cyborg is the shit, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you got that on DVD? I'm like, Brendan, you know I've got it on DVD. I lent it to him. He gave it back a couple of days later, and he goes, man, Cyborg sucked. And I said, Brendan, that's Cyborg. I got nothing else to say. Look, you know, these things, again, rose-colored glasses. I love Jean-Claude Van Damme, but this is a bad movie. This was just, you know, it's what we got laying around Canon Pictures in 1989. And it's the end of the 80s. It's the end of the excess. And there's not many redeeming values to it. The movie made money because everybody was hot to see something from Van Damme, but ultimately he goes and makes Kickboxer, and that's the better picture. It's one of my favorites. Hey, listen, if you want, I got the Shout Factory. They did this beautiful restoration of it. It's about as nice as the movie's going to get. It sounds good. There's a ton of special features. There's a bunch of interviews and a commentary with Albert Pune. It's good just to watch that stuff. Like, if you're going to buy the Cyborg Blu-ray, which I do recommend, it's a definite recommend, you're watching it for the special features. It's got great special features that run almost 3-4 hours long. Totally worth it for the commentary alone, because Albert really tells you how the sauce was made, and this movie was made for nothing. I don't even know if they spent the $400,000. I think this movie was made with breakfasts at Denny's and gift cards they had left over from the previous Christmas. It really shows. It's not good. Not good. Well, folks, with that being said, I think it's time we put this old bad doggy to sleep. Don't forget to like, to subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. Leave us a good review. I'll read it on the air, like Gazpacho's wonderful review. We really appreciate that stuff. Tell a friend. Introduce your friends. Be like, hey, look, I listened to the show at The Offerings. This guy, Jerry Horror, he's crazy. I don't even know he told us a story about Dennis Quaid and blowing up mailboxes. And then we talked about Cyborg. A lot of you people, you tell me, I listen to you while I'm at work. I listen to you on the drive home from work. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for making me a part of your routine, bringing me into your life in a very tangible way. And if you have a terrible job and I'm able to help you kill an hour at work, baby, I have lived up to the potential that my mother always said I would, to entertain you. And that's it. That's all I look to do, is to entertain you. Some of these movies are good, some of them are bad, but either way, we always have a good time, and that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what you do, it's who you do it with, and baby, you've been doing it with me, Jerry Horror. This has been The Offering, mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror, produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at theofferingwithjerryhorror@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter at theofferingwjh, or hit me up on the Instagram at Jerry Horror. You get the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Join us next time for another Offering.
Chasing worries like O'Maya, drum a twist that shake your core. Every episode, we craving more. Mostly horror, always genre.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.